Around 4,000 years ago, in the lands of present-day Pakistan and northwest India, a civilization flourished quietly. It built cities with straight roads, underground drainage, standardized bricks, and public baths that still astonish modern engineers. It traded with Mesopotamia, crafted exquisite seals, and left behind thousands of artifacts. Yet today, not a single human being can read what they wrote. This is not because the writing was crude. And not because archaeologists failed to look hard enough. The Indus Valley Civilization created a writing system so compact, so disciplined, and so enigmatic that it has resisted every attempt at decoding for over a century. Imagine discovering the written words of an entire civilization, and realizing that none of them speak back. No kings boast of victories. No prayers explain their gods. No laws describe how society functioned. Just short strings of symbols, carved into stone and clay, staring back at us in silence. Today, we will explore one of the greatest unsolved mysteries of ancient history, the Indus Valley script. Where was it found? How did it work? Why can't we read it? And most importantly, what might it be hiding from us? By the end of this journey, you may realize that the Indus people were far more advanced, and far more different, than we ever imagined. But to understand why this script remains unreadable, we must first go back to the moment it was rediscovered. In the early decades of the 20th century, nobody was looking for a lost civilization in the plains of the Indus River. Archaeology in British India focused mostly on temples, inscriptions, and monuments tied to known historical periods. The idea that an advanced, urban society older than classical India could exist here was not even considered. And yet, history often reveals itself not through intention, but through accident. Railway construction crews in Punjab were tearing through ancient mounds to extract bricks. These bricks were unusually uniform, strong, and perfectly fired. Engineers were impressed. Archaeologists, however, were alarmed. These were not medieval ruins. They were far older. When excavations finally began at Harappa in the 1920s, what emerged from beneath the soil stunned the world. Wide streets laid out in grids. Houses with private wells. Public drainage systems running beneath the roads. Standardized bricks used across entire neighborhoods. This was not a primitive settlement. This was a planned city, older than most civilizations known at the time. Then came the objects. Small stone seals, carefully carved, began appearing in large numbers. Each seal carried two things, an animal figure, and a short line of strange symbols. This discovery forced historians to confront an uncomfortable truth. While Mesopotamia and Egypt were long believed to be the world's earliest cradles of civilization, here was another, just as old, just as advanced, and completely unknown. But unlike Egypt, the Indus civilization did not announce itself with colossal statues or pyramids. It did not carve long royal inscriptions into stone. It left no obvious kings. No dynasties. No myths written in text. Instead, it whispered. And those whispers came in the form of symbols no one could read. As excavations expanded to Mohenjo-daro, hundreds of kilometers away, the same symbols appeared again. Identical signs. Same writing style. Same precision. This was not local experimentation. This was a standardized script used across a vast territory. At this moment, scholars were confident. Confident to the point of arrogance. After all, writing systems had been deciphered before. Egyptian hieroglyphs fell to the Rosetta Stone. Cuneiform yielded to bilingual tablets. Surely this would be the same. They expected a breakthrough within years. Instead, they encountered a wall. The inscriptions were incredibly short. Most were no longer than 5 symbols. There were no long texts. No paragraphs. No repeating stories. No obvious names. And most troubling of all, there was no bilingual inscription. No Indus Greek stone. No translation key. Nothing. What had initially seemed like a routine decipherment problem slowly transformed into something far more disturbing. This civilization had writing, but it refused to speak. As more sites were uncovered, Dhalavira, Lot Hal, Kalibangan, the pattern became impossible to ignore. The script was everywhere, yet nowhere explained. It appeared on seals, pottery shards, copper tablets, tools, and even bangles. But never on large monuments. Never on tombs. Never on walls meant to be read publicly. This raised a profound question: who was this writing for? In Egypt, writing was political. In Mesopotamia, it was administrative and religious. But the Indus script did not behave like either. There were no royal names we could identify. No repeated phrases announcing power or divinity. No boastful declarations of conquest. The civilization that built some of the most sophisticated cities of the ancient world seemed uninterested in telling future generations who they were. This was not an accident. It was a choice. By the 1930s, the Indus Valley Civilization had been officially recognized as one of the world's great Bronze Age cultures. And yet, it remained deeply unsettling to historians. How could a civilization so advanced leave behind so little explanation of itself? The seals became the center of attention. Scholars examined them obsessively. Animals appeared again and again, especially a mysterious unicorn figure found on hundreds of seals. Was it mythical? Symbolic? Totemic? Above these animals were the symbols, usually 4 or 5 of them, carved with incredible precision. The repetition of certain signs suggested grammar, order, and rules. This was not random. But here is where the mystery deepened. Despite decades of excavation, archaeologists never found schools, libraries, or scribal workshops. Writing existed, but it was not everywhere. It was controlled. Restricted. Minimal. This suggested that literacy, if it existed, was limited to a small group, or that writing itself served a very specific function. And then came the realization that changed everything. The Indus script had not evolved over time. From its earliest appearance to its final disappearance, the symbols remained remarkably consistent. No gradual changes. No regional variations. No evolution into something else. This meant the script was already fully developed when it appeared, and vanished suddenly when the civilization declined. That alone is extraordinary. Most writing systems evolve. They grow. They adapt. The Indus script did neither. It arrived complete. And it left without descendants. By the mid-20th century, enthusiasm gave way to frustration. Every proposed decipherment collapsed under scrutiny. Each theory contradicted another. Linguists, archaeologists, mathematicians, all failed to break the silence. What began as an exciting discovery had become one of archaeology's greatest humiliations. Because the problem was no longer technical. It was philosophical. This civilization clearly understood writing. It mastered urban planning, trade, and standardization on a scale that rivals modern cities. And yet, it deliberately chose not to leave behind readable history. Which leads us to a disturbing thought. Perhaps the Indus people did not want to be remembered the way other civilizations did. Perhaps their idea of success was not domination, monumentality, or legacy, but balance, order, and disappearance without collapse. And if that is true, then the Indus script is not merely unreadable. It is intentionally quiet. When scholars first began examining the Indus script closely, they expected familiarity. After all, writing systems tend to obey certain universal patterns. They grow longer over time. They evolve visibly. They show grammatical repetition. They leave behind mistakes, variations, and informal usage. The Indus script did none of this. At first glance, the symbols appear deceptively simple. There are no elaborate scenes like Egyptian hieroglyphs, no dense wedge patterns like cuneiform. Instead, the signs are clean, geometric, and deliberate: lines, strokes, circles, tridents, fish-like forms, cone shapes, jars, arrows, and abstract motifs that resist easy interpretation. Yet behind this simplicity lies something unsettling. Every symbol looks intentional, standardized, and finalized. By the time the script appears in the archaeological record, it is already mature. Across all known sites of the Indus Valley Civilization, researchers have identified roughly 400 distinct signs. That number alone is revealing. It is too many for a simple alphabet, which usually contains a few dozen characters. Yet it is far too few for a pictographic system, which often requires thousands of symbols to represent ideas and objects. The Indus script sits in an uncomfortable middle ground, refusing to align neatly with known categories. Even more puzzling is how these symbols are used. Most inscriptions are astonishingly short. The average text contains only 4 to 5 signs. The longest known example contains just 26. There are no long narratives. No historical records. No myths. No prayers. No laws carved into stone for all to see. This brevity has haunted researchers for decades, because short texts provide very little context. Without repetition across long passages, patterns remain stubbornly elusive. But short does not mean random. When scholars mapped the placement of symbols across thousands of seals and objects, they noticed something extraordinary. The signs followed consistent positional rules. Certain symbols almost always appeared at the beginning of inscriptions. Others appeared only at the end. Some never occurred together. Some frequently paired up. This behavior suggested syntax, rules governing how symbols could be arranged. In other words, this was not decoration. This was structured communication. Another crucial detail soon emerged: directionality. By examining overlaps and spacing, researchers concluded that most Indus inscriptions were written from right to left. This alone challenged early assumptions, as many ancient scripts flow left to right or vertically. The direction was not guessed, it was inferred from where patterns and symbol crowding. The script was designed to be read in a specific way, by people who clearly knew the rules. And yet, despite this structure, something was missing. There was no evidence of phonetic spelling. In alphabetic systems, symbols correspond to sounds. In syllabic systems, they correspond to sound units. In logographic systems, they represent words or ideas. The Indus script stubbornly resists classification into any of these categories. Some symbols repeat far too often to be full words. Others are too rare to be phonetic letters. The system appears to blend properties, but never fully commits. This led some researchers to propose a radical idea: perhaps the script was not meant to encode spoken language in the way we expect. Perhaps it served a different purpose altogether. To understand this possibility, we must look at where the script appears. The vast majority of inscriptions are found on small seals, often square, carved from stone. These seals were likely used in trade, pressed into clay to mark goods, ownership, or authorization. This context suggests the script may have functioned as identifiers rather than storytellers. Names, titles, clans, guilds, or institutions, compressed into symbolic form. If true, this would explain the brevity. It would also explain why the same symbols repeat across distant cities. The script may have acted as a shared administrative language, allowing trade across thousands of kilometers without spoken communication. But here is the problem. Even administrative scripts usually grow more complex over time. They expand. They adapt to new needs. The Indus script did not. From its earliest appearance around 2600 BCE to its disappearance around 1900 BCE, the script remained remarkably stable. No experimental phase. No regional dialects. No simplified offshoots. No transitional forms. This level of consistency suggests tight control. Someone, or some institution, was regulating how writing was used. Which raises an uncomfortable question: why would a civilization so advanced restrict its own writing? There is another strange feature that deepens the mystery. Certain symbols appear with uncanny frequency, far more than others. One particular sign, often called the jar or pot sign, appears at the end of many inscriptions. Another group of signs clusters at the beginning. This has led some scholars to suspect grammatical markers, perhaps prefixes and suffixes. But without longer texts, this remains speculation. And speculation has been dangerous territory for Indus studies. Over the decades, dozens of decipherments have been proposed. Some claim the script represents an early form of Sanskrit. Others argue it encodes a Dravidian language. A few even suggest it is not linguistic at all, but a system of religious or cosmological symbols. Each theory sounds convincing, until it collapses under scrutiny. The greatest obstacle is simple: there is no bilingual key. No Indus Rosetta Stone. No translation paired with a known language. Without it, every interpretation remains hypothetical. Patterns can be identified, but meaning slips away. This has led some researchers to a deeply controversial conclusion, that the Indus script may not be a full writing system in the conventional sense. That it may represent a symbolic code used by elites, traders, or ritual specialists, rather than a tool for everyday communication. But this explanation introduces another paradox. If writing was limited, why invest so much precision into it? Why standardize it across an empire-sized civilization? Why engrave it carefully onto seals, pottery, and tools? Nothing about the Indus script suggests casual use. Everything about it suggests importance. And then there is its silence. When the Indus Valley Civilization declined, the script vanished completely. No later culture adopted it. No descendant system evolved from it. Unlike cuneiform or hieroglyphs, it left no children. No echoes. No memory. It is as if the writing system died with the civilization, and was meant to. This brings us to a haunting realization. The Indus people clearly possessed the intellectual capacity to record history, power, and belief. They chose not to. Instead, they encoded something minimal, controlled, and restrained. A system that functioned perfectly within their society, but offered almost nothing to the future. If the Indus script truly represents language, then somewhere beneath its symbols lies sound, spoken words once uttered by millions. And yet, unlike every other ancient civilization we know, the Indus Valley left behind no trace of how its people spoke. No transcribed prayers. No phonetic spellings. No names carved into monuments. No kings proclaiming victories. Nothing that allows us to hear their voices across time. This silence is not accidental. In civilizations like Egypt and Mesopotamia, writing exploded into every aspect of life. Royal decrees, religious hymns, economic transactions, personal letters, language spilled onto walls, tablets, and papyrus. Writing became power made permanent. The Indus Valley Civilization, by contrast, appears to have deliberately restrained the use of written expression. And that restraint may be the key to understanding why its script remains unreadable. Linguists attempting to decode the script face an immediate obstacle: there is no clear evidence of phonetic structure. In readable scripts, certain patterns betray sound-based writing. Repeated signs often correspond to common sounds like vowels or grammatical particles. Variations emerge as scribes make mistakes or adapt speech into text. None of this is visible in the Indus corpus. Instead, the symbols behave like fixed units, carefully arranged but rarely altered. This has led some scholars to argue that the Indus script might not represent spoken language at all. That suggestion is radical, but not impossible. Throughout history, humans have developed systems of communication that are symbolic rather than phonetic. Consider heraldry, mathematical notation, musical scores, or even modern road signs. These systems convey meaning without encoding speech directly. If the Indus script functioned similarly, it would explain why it resists phonetic decipherment. It would also explain why inscriptions are short, why symbols are standardized, and why texts appear primarily in administrative contexts. But this theory creates a new puzzle. Why would a civilization capable of urban planning, hydraulic engineering, long-distance trade, and standardized weights choose not to write its language? One possibility is that power in the Indus world was not centralized in the way it was elsewhere. There are no palaces, no royal tombs, no statues of kings. Authority may have been distributed among councils, guilds, or merchant elites rather than concentrated in divine rulers. Without a ruling class obsessed with legacy, there may have been no incentive to record history in monumental form. Writing, in such a society, might have been purely functional. A seal did not need to speak. It needed only to identify, authenticate, and authorize. Meaning could be understood within context, without narrative. The system worked because everyone involved shared the same cultural framework. But there is another, more unsettling idea. What if the Indus script was intentionally opaque? Some researchers have proposed that the writing system was designed to be readable only to a select group: traders, administrators, or ritual specialists. In this view, the script functioned as a gatekeeping mechanism, restricting access to information rather than spreading it. This would explain why symbols remain consistent and why variation is minimal. Control requires standardization. This theory gains weight when we consider where the script is absent. There is no evidence of writing on household walls, children's objects, or casual tools. The script appears almost exclusively in contexts associated with trade, authority, or ritual. It was not democratized. It was not taught widely. It was not meant for storytelling or self-expression. Writing was power, and power was quiet. This raises a critical question: if the script encodes meaning without sound, how was that meaning transmitted across generations? The answer may lie in education and tradition rather than text. Knowledge could have been passed orally, visually, and through apprenticeship. The script may have acted as a mnemonic system, triggering information already known rather than recording it fully. A seal might not tell a story, but it could point to one. Think of it as a key, not a book. This perspective transforms how we view the failure to decipher the script. Perhaps we are not missing a translation, we are missing the culture that gave the symbols meaning. And that culture vanished. Around 1900 BCE, the Indus Valley Civilization began to decline. Cities were abandoned. Trade networks collapsed. Urban life gave way to smaller settlements. And with that collapse, the script disappeared entirely. No successor civilization adopted it. No neighboring culture referenced it. It simply stopped. If the script had been phonetic, fragments might have survived in later languages. If it had recorded myths or laws, echoes might remain. But a symbolic system tied tightly to specific institutions would die when those institutions fell. Which brings us to a chilling possibility. The Indus script may be unreadable not because we lack data, but because it was never meant to survive outside its original context. It was a closed system, perfectly adapted to its world, and useless without it. Yet modern technology has begun to challenge this pessimism. Computational linguistics has revealed that the script exhibits statistical properties similar to known languages. The distribution of symbols, the conditional probabilities, and the positional rules all resemble structured communication rather than random marks. This suggests intent, complexity, and order. Something is being said. We just don't know how to listen. Few ancient mysteries have divided scholars as fiercely as the Indus script. For over a century, linguists, archaeologists, computer scientists, and historians have argued, not just over how to read it, but whether it can be read at all. What began as an academic challenge has become a battleground of ideologies, methods, and assumptions about what writing itself truly is. At the heart of the debate lies a simple but explosive question: is the Indus script a true writing system that encodes language, or is it a symbolic system that conveys meaning without speech? The answer reshapes everything. Those who argue that the script represents language point first to its structure. The symbols follow consistent patterns. Certain signs appear frequently at the beginnings or ends of inscriptions. Others cluster together in predictable ways. This is not random decoration. Statistical analyses show that the script has syntax-like properties, rules governing how symbols can be arranged. In known writing systems, these properties usually reflect grammar. Supporters of the linguistic theory also highlight repetition across vast distances. The same symbols appear in cities hundreds of kilometers apart, suggesting a shared communicative system across the civilization. Such standardization implies teaching, learning, and widespread understanding. It is difficult to imagine a non-linguistic system achieving this level of consistency over centuries. But then come the objections. Critics point out that every deciphered ancient script shares certain features that the Indus script lacks. There are no long texts. No bilingual inscriptions. No visible evolution. No clear markers of phonetic variation. Most known writing systems grow messier over time as spoken language changes. The Indus script does not. It remains frozen. This rigidity troubles linguists. Language lives. It shifts, adapts, and fractures. Writing that represents language usually reflects this movement. The Indus symbols, however, appear almost immune to time. Over hundreds of years, the signs remain remarkably stable. That stability has led some scholars to argue that the script functioned more like a system of standardized codes, perhaps denoting commodities, clans, professions, or ritual categories. In this view, the symbols were not meant to capture speech but to label and classify. A seal might not say a sentence. It might say who you are. The debate intensified in the late 20th century when computational analysis entered the field. Researchers began feeding the Indus symbols into algorithms designed to test linguistic properties. The results were unsettling for both sides. On one hand, the script displayed non-random structure similar to known languages. On the other, it failed certain tests expected of phonetic writing systems. It sat in an uncomfortable middle ground, too structured to be meaningless, too limited to be conventional language. This ambiguity fractured the scholarly community. One camp doubled down, arguing that the script represents a Dravidian language, an early ancestor of Tamil or related tongues. They proposed sound values, grammatical rules, and even partial translations. But their reconstructions varied wildly. The same symbol could be read in multiple incompatible ways. No consensus emerged. Another camp rejected linguistic decoding entirely. They argued that forcing the script into a language framework was a mistake born of expectation. Not all civilizations wrote the same way. The Indus Valley may have invented something unique. But uniqueness is a dangerous claim. If the script is truly non-linguistic, it would challenge the very definition of writing. It would suggest that one of the world's greatest civilizations operated without recording speech, relying instead on abstract symbols understood only within specific contexts. That idea unsettles scholars trained to see writing as inseparable from language. And yet, the archaeological record offers no comfort. No Indus school tablets. No scribal training texts. No graffiti. No casual writing. Writing appears controlled, restricted, almost ceremonial. This is not how language-based writing systems usually behave. Then there is the issue of power. In Mesopotamia, writing served kings. In Egypt, it glorified gods and pharaohs. The Indus script, by contrast, avoids individuals entirely. No rulers are named. No victories proclaimed. No divine genealogies carved into stone. It is writing without ego. Some researchers now suggest that this absence is the point. The Indus Valley may have practiced a radically different model of social organization, one that minimized hierarchy and resisted personal glorification. Writing, in such a society, would serve systems rather than individuals. Meaning without voice. This reframing has shifted the debate in recent years. Instead of asking, what language did the Indus people speak? Scholars are beginning to ask, what did they need writing for? That question opens new paths. If the script was primarily administrative, it might encode quantities, ownership, or authorization rather than narrative. If it was ritual, symbols might refer to concepts rather than sounds. If it was both, the system could combine elements of language and symbolism in ways we do not yet recognize. The war over meaning, then, may be based on a false dichotomy. The Indus script might not fit cleanly into our categories because our categories are incomplete. And that realization leads to a more profound implication. Perhaps the failure to decipher the Indus script is not due to missing data or flawed methods, but to a mismatch between ancient intention and modern expectation. We are listening for speech when the script may be communicating in a different register entirely. For most of the 20th century, the Indus script resisted every human attempt at understanding. Linguists argued. Archaeologists disagreed. Theories rose and collapsed. By the early 2000s, the mystery seemed frozen, until a new kind of reader entered the story. Machines. Unlike humans, computers do not care about history, pride, or academic tradition. They see patterns, probabilities, and structures. When researchers began applying computational linguistics to the Indus script, the goal was not to translate it, but to answer a more fundamental question: does this system behave like language at all? The first results were surprising. Using entropy analysis, a mathematical way of measuring order and predictability, scientists compared the Indus script with known writing systems, undeciphered scripts, and non-linguistic symbol systems. The script did not behave randomly. It showed structured constraints similar to natural languages. Certain symbols rarely appeared together. Others almost always followed specific signs. This was not decoration. At the same time, the script did not fully match any known linguistic system. It lacked the flexibility and redundancy expected in phonetic writing. Instead, it occupied a narrow statistical space, somewhere between language and symbolic code. This in-between nature puzzled researchers. One landmark study compared the Indus script with Sumerian cuneiform, Egyptian hieroglyphs, DNA sequences, and even computer programming languages. Astonishingly, the Indus symbols aligned closer to linguistic systems than to non-linguistic ones, but not close enough to be comfortably classified. It was structured, but restrained. These findings reignited the debate, but now with numbers instead of opinions. The script could no longer be dismissed as meaningless symbols. Yet computers could not extract grammar, vocabulary, or phonetic values either. The wall remained. So researchers changed strategy. Instead of asking what the symbols meant, they asked how the system was used. Algorithms mapped symbol frequency across regions and time periods. They found subtle variations, regional preferences, stylistic shifts, and changes in sign popularity. This suggested cultural dynamics beneath the surface. The script was not static after all. Machine learning models then attempted clustering, grouping inscriptions by similarity. Certain clusters correlated with specific artifact types, seals, tablets, pottery. This hinted at functional differences. The same script might have served multiple purposes depending on context. Meaning may have lived in use, not translation. Some of the most ambitious projects attempted probabilistic decipherment. Instead of assigning sounds, they assigned functions. A symbol might indicate ownership. Another might mark authority. Another could represent a standardized commodity. These models did not read the script, but they could simulate how it might operate in real-world systems. Yet even machines faced an impossible limitation. Data. With only a few thousand short inscriptions, the sample size was painfully small. Modern language models require millions of data points. The Indus script offers fragments. Seals barely longer than a tweet. Without longer texts, even the most powerful algorithms cannot fully learn the system. This scarcity forces a sobering realization. The Indus people may never have intended their script to be read the way we read texts. It may have been designed for brevity, recognition, and authority rather than storytelling. In such a system, decoding meaning might require cultural knowledge that vanished thousands of years ago. AI can detect structure, but not intention. And yet, machines have revealed something profound. The Indus script is not broken. It is complete. It worked perfectly for the society that created it. The failure lies not in the script, but in our distance from its world. Computers can map patterns, but they cannot reconstruct lost social contracts, shared beliefs, or unspoken rules. This realization has shifted the frontier of research again. Instead of forcing translation, scholars now focus on reconstruction. What kind of society produces a script like this? What values does it reflect? What does it prioritize, and what does it deliberately omit? Machines have helped narrow the possibilities. The script's brevity suggests efficiency. Its standardization suggests regulation. Its absence of rulers suggests decentralization. Its persistence suggests stability. Combined, these clues point toward a civilization that valued order over expression, systems over individuals. Writing as infrastructure. This reframing has profound consequences. If the Indus script was never meant to capture speech, then decipherment may not look like translation at all. It may resemble reverse engineering a protocol, understanding how symbols function within a system rather than what words they represent. Computers are uniquely suited for that task. Recent research explores network theory, treating symbols as nodes connected by relationships. Others use agent-based models to simulate how the script could operate within trade, governance, or ritual. These approaches do not promise dramatic breakthroughs, but they steadily shrink the mystery. The script is becoming less alien. And yet, there is an irony here. The more we understand how the Indus script works, the less certain we become that it can ever be read in the traditional sense. The goal shifts from decoding messages to understanding civilization. Perhaps that was always the point. For centuries, scholars searched for the Indus script in ruins, seals, and broken tablets. But one unsettling question slowly emerged: what if the script did not truly vanish? What if fragments of its logic, its structure, or even its meaning survived, not in stone, but in people? This possibility has long fascinated researchers, especially linguists. The Indus Valley Civilization did not disappear overnight. Its cities declined, populations migrated, cultures blended, and traditions transformed. Language does not simply vanish, it evolves, fractures, and absorbs. If the Indus people spoke a language, traces of it might still exist. The most debated candidate is Dravidian. Today, Dravidian languages, Tamil, Telugu, Kannada, Malayalam, are spoken by hundreds of millions, primarily in southern India. But linguistic analysis suggests these languages were once far more widespread, possibly dominating much of the subcontinent before later migrations reshaped the linguistic map. Some scholars argue that the Indus script encodes an early Dravidian language. They point to symbolic parallels, agricultural vocabulary, and cultural continuities. Certain symbols may represent objects or concepts still present in Dravidian traditions. But evidence remains circumstantial. Unlike Egyptian hieroglyphs, which were unlocked using bilingual inscriptions, the Indus script offers no such anchor. There is no Indus Dravidian Rosetta Stone. Without phonetic confirmation, every proposed match risks becoming interpretation rather than proof. Other researchers suggest Proto-Munda languages, spoken today by tribal communities in eastern India, may preserve older Indus linguistic layers. These languages contain agricultural terms, spatial concepts, and symbolic structures that feel ancient, possibly pre-Aryan. Still, the problem remains the same. No living language can be definitively tied to the script. And that uncertainty opens a dangerous door. Throughout history, undeciphered scripts have attracted fringe theories. Some claim the Indus script encodes lost Atlantean knowledge. Others propose extraterrestrial origins, advanced prehistoric technologies, or global supercivilizations erased by catastrophe. These claims thrive in the absence of answers. But serious scholarship pushes back hard. There is no evidence the Indus people possessed technologies beyond their time. What makes their civilization remarkable is not mystery, but restraint. They built vast cities without grandiose inscriptions, colossal statues, or glorified kings. Their silence is intentional. Anthropologists studying modern South Asian communities have found intriguing continuities. Traditional craft guilds, standardized brick ratios, urban layouts, water management practices, and even ritual cleanliness echo Indus patterns. Culture, unlike language, leaves fingerprints everywhere. Perhaps the script functioned as a professional or administrative system, understood only by trained specialists, merchants, officials, or priests. If so, its disappearance may reflect social transformation rather than collapse. When the system was no longer needed, the script faded quietly. This idea gains strength when we consider what the script does not show. There are no long religious texts. No myths. No epic narratives. No genealogies. This absence suggests writing was not used for storytelling or identity, but for coordination. A tool, not a voice. Modern societies offer parallels. Barcodes, QR codes, shipping labels, digital protocols, none are meant to be read aloud or remembered. They work perfectly within systems and appear meaningless outside them. Imagine archaeologists finding only QR codes 5,000 years from now. Would they call it a language? This analogy has reshaped how scholars interpret the Indus script. The goal may never have been linguistic expression. Instead, it may have enabled trust, regulation, and exchange in one of the ancient world's largest urban networks. If so, searching for grammar may be the wrong question entirely. Still, some researchers persist in exploring phonetic possibilities. A few symbols recur at the beginnings or ends of inscriptions, hinting at prefixes or suffixes. Certain signs might represent numbers, measures, or names. But without longer texts, these hints remain shadows. What survives most clearly is intent. The Indus people chose not to immortalize rulers. They chose not to glorify conquest. They chose systems over spectacle. Their writing reflects this worldview, precise, controlled, and minimal. And this may be why it unsettles us. We expect writing to speak loudly across time. The Indus script refuses. It whispers, and only to those who know the code. That code died with the civilization's social structure, not with its people. This reframes the mystery entirely. Perhaps the script was never meant for us. Perhaps its unreadability is not failure, but success. A system so perfectly adapted to its time that it left no excess meaning behind. Yet humans are not satisfied with silence. The search continues, not because we expect a sudden breakthrough, but because every attempt teaches us something new about how civilizations communicate, organize, and remember.